What's up, DAW Nation? Welcome to this episode of In the DAW with Elliot Berger, breaking down his song Behind the Glass. In this episode, you're going to learn about how to make glitchy drum beats, how to sound design a Reese Bass, how to do vocal chops, how to rhythmically use a FabFilter Pro R reverb, and how to get 10,000 of the best orchestral libraries in the world for 20 bucks a month. And we're going to start right now. This is part 2 of what we're going to do with Elliot Berger. We're going to be breaking down his song Behind the Glass. If you haven't checked out the last episode that we did with him, please go check that out.
With all those kind of vocally choppy things, how do you sequence all that stuff? Because that's one of the things that, it's one of the most common questions I get asked. Like literally, how do you sequence all these noises and stuff?
A lot of it is honestly like kind of a trial and error process. So going through, once you've sliced your vocal up, so import the vocal, I'll then highlight an area of it. If I do it on some other audio in here, if I took this, for example, highlight a section of it, right click, slice the new MIDI track, and then in this menu, I usually pick eighth notes because it works. I find if you pick transients or warp markers, you'll get random slices. Some of them will be really long, some will be really short, some of them will just be like chops and breaths and stuff. And if there's a bit of the vocal that's quite complex, you'll end up with all sorts of mess. If you pick eighth notes, then you're getting concise, same bit, same sort of length every time. And if you time stretch your vocal beforehand, then it makes that quite a smooth, easy process. And it's a case of going through the vocal and finding cuts that you like, and then messing around with different rhythms and sequencing it. I'll usually make sure I've got some sort of layer underneath first, because obviously if you're cutting it to a rhythm, you want to make sure it works with that rhythm as well. You know, if you're doing like a dubstep track and you maybe don't have your drums in yet, grab a loop, throw that in and cut it over that. Like, so there's some sort of consistency. And once I've got like one bar, you can then copy that phrase and edit it each time. So these first three notes are actually repeated. These first three notes are repeated at the start of every phrase, and the note afterwards is what changes. So at the end of these 4 bars, we get this 3-note turn there, and this note repeats from there, but it's different the second time it happens, etc. So you can get away with a lot of repetition, but the initial idea is very much a trial and error. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes, sometimes it takes an hour, and you might find again that you'll have something that you think is quite cool, and it's like 90% there. You'll write your tune and you'll come back and tidy it up later.
Awesome. So I suppose, for those who may be super new, it kind of looks really complicated, or there's what look like almost seemingly random vocal bits, but it's almost like try a few things, and then once say 1 bar is good, you duplicate it, make a variation, and then almost do the same again. So duplicate that 2 bars and make a variation. So there's a lot going on, but there's actually quite a lot of structure sort of buried away in all this.
Exactly. Like any good melody is always simple anyway. If you're doing like a lead synth or anything, you still want it to be a really simple melody. This is no different. As we both said, like it might be a little bit of sort of trying, seeing what sounds good. You still have to make sure that the idea underneath fundamentally is really simple and really straightforward.
Walk me through some of your glitchy sound effects that you have going on. That was really intriguing, really sound designy, kind of ear candy that I was really liking.
Cool. So this is a bit of a process to get to. So what I'll normally do first is do 4 or 8 bars of drums and just sequence something or some sort of textures underneath it. So this is the original drum beat. So it's really simple, but there's a couple of loops like this one that's got loads of noise in it. So there's something running through the whole time, so that if you then go through and cut it up, all that noise and all that texture is going to get cut up and moved with it. And the same with the crash, like even though it's only 4 bars, the crash lingers on for probably like 2 or 3 beats. So when you're cutting that up as well, then that crash gets stuttered with it. Because I'll layer a crash later on, but as you can see, it ends up being quite edited by the end of it. Like various plugins and stuff, but some of the plugins sound like you've used that plugin. So like D-Blue Glitch is one I used to use like years ago, and that sounds, anytime you glitch anything in that, it sounds like you've used that. And I imagine the same with a lot of other stuff, whereas if you're doing it manually, you're the only one who's going to end up with the configuration of drums that you end up with. So other than making sure that the snare always lands on the 3 every time, so that the rhythm feels like it works, everything else is, again, trial and error, cutting stuff up. So this is one of the cuts from the cymbal that's just been stuttered really, really quickly. And here the kick drum's repeated, but it's pitched. So if I open it up, just transpose it. Again, that one's -6, and I think that's -6 as well. So if I take this kick drum, for example, you can do loads of stuff with it. So if I, for example, take the BPM here and just, solve it first. Take the BPM and stretch it out. You can maybe like reverse that. You end up with all sorts of kind of weird and random textures by messing around with stuff. Taking like these little bits in here, and you can maybe go in and like repeat it. And if you repeat things really quickly, Ableton kind of processes it in a weird way and glitches it oddly. They changed it between 9 and 10, so I started this tune in Ableton 9 and then had to redo the drums again in 10 because of the way that it processes audio. You know, trying things like different warp modes, all the rest of it will create different textures. And there's a bunch of stuff over here. There's also automating panning, which can make it sound kind of cool. So like over here, you know, little things like that. And the actual processing on this is super simple. Like I've not compressed it or anything because all of the processing happens at this stage when you just make your drum loop. So I've got all the compression, the soft clipping, everything at this point, and then that's just sampled to this. Yeah, I mean, the best thing to do, to be honest, if you're trying to do this kind of thing, is just try every possibility. Like try every warp mode, try pitching stuff up like 48 semitones or whatever, pitching stuff down, try stuff that isn't warped and then pitch that and that will stretch it out as well or whatever. Stretch this out, stretch that out and then bounce that again. It will reset everything back to, so then we can maybe pitch it down. Yeah, so you can kind of repeat that and then I can maybe bounce that, etc. Yeah, it's just about messing around really. And once you've got different sections as well, you can like repeat those sections and then go in and make fine edits to little phrases. So once you've got like a, you know, if I copied this to maybe over here somewhere, I could then go in and change the rhythm that it stutters here or something that makes it interesting, keeps it interesting.
What's the return track that the vocal group is getting sent to? Is that a reverb or some compression type thing?
That's a reverb. So I have Pro R here, which is just like pretty much the standard setting. And then I have Pro Q2 afterwards, which takes out any of the low end and some of the top end, quite a lot of the top end actually. And then I send most things to that. There was a bit of time difference between writing Believe and writing this, and the process at which I did reverb kind of changed. I tend to use sends unless I absolutely have to now. It's not even like a CPU thing. I just find that you get a more consistent reverb. And you can obviously EQ it afterwards as well to take out any of the mud and all the rest of it. Yeah, so, and I have 3. I have a main reverb, which I don't use that much anymore, so it's not really a main reverb. A plate reverb, and there's delay. And my new template has like a really short drum reverb on it as well.
Your kick, it punches really, really hard. That was one of the main things that really caught me. So how, is it just sample selection or did you do something to it?
So I've pitched it down 2 semitones. The actual sample is from a direct sample pack, which I rinse the drums from that all the time. So I pitch down slightly so it's got more of a punch, like a weight to it. Sometimes if I'm pitching stuff down, I might edge them slightly so the sample kind of stays quite tight, but I didn't need to in this case. Tiny bit of EQ to take out the mids to focus the weight at the low end and the click at the top, and that's it. Doesn't need any more than that really. It's all, drums are always like sample selection. It's not necessarily about processing stuff to oblivion. Like if it doesn't sound good to start with, it's not going to sound good at the end. Equally, if it sounds really good to start with, you don't have to do anything with it to get a good product out at the end.
Like the way to view drum processing is, whilst yes, you can make a drum sound better with processing, chances are if you're using a good sample pack, then that's already been done. And unless you're like 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years into sound design, there's a good chance the person who made that kick drum or made that snare has a slightly better ear than you do, kind of how to compress it, how to EQ it and stuff. So it's not like you need to always compress or EQ your drums. Oftentimes you can just drop them straight in and it can work out really good.
To build off that slightly, like as you said, samples are compressed anyway, particularly drums. So if you're compressing them further, you're usually just squashing any life out of it at all. Particularly if you're getting like a dubstep or a drum bass or a trap like sample pack. Those genres are really loud, and so the sound designer who did those drums is going to have squashed to make it fit that style. So you don't need to. As you said, like if it sounds good to start with, they've probably got a better ear than you. Trust it, go with it, you'll be fine.
If say someone who is a regular listener to your music, like what would they be most surprised about this particular project? Like, do you do any weird techniques or use any samples that are unexpected?
Well, I've done a few kind of things that have sort of followed this glitchy line before. There's the Reese Bass, which was sort of a new one, and also structurally, I had this idea for this intro, and I had the first drop, and I'd kind of I lay out a structure as MIDI tracks at the top, so I kind of know where I'm going. And I sent it off to a few mates and was like, I had no idea what to do. And actually Direct again came back and was like, don't have a breakdown. Don't worry about that. Just go intro, have a really long drop that evolves and changes over time, and then have an outro. It doesn't have to be like, quite block, especially with this kind of stuff. Like, people aren't DJing it. It's not for that environment. It's for, listening and enjoying at home or whatever. And so you don't need to think about having this sort of intro, build up, drop, breakdown, build, drop, outro type structure, because it doesn't matter for this sort of thing. So yeah, those are the two things, that and this sort of like Reese sound, which I've used quite a few times now, but I think I probably hadn't before this point. So taking like a chill out tune and just adding this like really aggressive sound to it. Little things like that.
If you keep adding everyone as Facebook friends, you hit this weird threshold where all of a sudden there's some weird feedback loop network effect sort of thing appears, where almost everyone starts to add you, and then everyone gets recommended as a friend. So especially for people starting out, if you just keep basically adding DJs and have a music-related picture as your Facebook profile thing, I'm pretty sure you can pick up like 300 or 400 followers and get really good reach out to them just by literally adding every DJ on Facebook. And pretty much within 4 or 5 months, you can have like a full 5,000 Facebook friends that are, say, 4,000 of them DJs, which, I mean, it's not very targeted, but it's still a way to at least get started if you're in that like 200 to 300 follower phase trying to get out of that.
But with Facebook, if you really want to utilize Facebook for all it's worth, you want to milk it for all it's worth to be able to grow in a fashion that you want to, you almost have to sacrifice your personal Facebook page, not your like DJ page, but you just have to sacrifice like your personal first name, last name page in attempts to keep going. So if you're willing to do that, or if you're just willing to have two different pages, one you're willing to sacrifice and one you just keep for a personal use, that's fine too. But there's so many benefits with utilizing Facebook for the way that he's talking about. The power of being able to connect with people from all over the world that are interested in the same thing is just like, it's like, what? Like, this is a cheat code to be able to do this. That's a really good point, Adam. And I would highly encourage anyone who's doing that, if they do add you, take the time to know who you're adding, message them, get to know them. You can not only get good friends or followers or whatever, but maybe you can find some people to collaborate with, people to, that can help you on your journey, like lifelong friends. That's how I met Daddy, to be honest. Like, that's how I met Brendan, who's come on the show multiple times. That's how I met him. Let's go deeper into that Reese Bass. That was actually one of my questions I wanted to ask, because it's pretty freaking good.
I'm not sure where the original sound came from, whether it was me messing around. It was probably, if I'm honest, like a YouTube video or something from a while back. And it's kind of one of those sounds I've had sitting around and not used, but you sort of throw it in tunes and you develop it and then you scrap it or whatever. It's all in Operator, the whole thing. I use Operator a lot. I don't use FMA just because I find that Operator can do it better, and because it's an Ableton plugin, it tends to run a little bit smoother.
You got a good solid amount of stuff in there.
Yeah, as I said, it's one of those sounds that I've sort of built up. Here we go. So this is the actual original, which sounds like massively different. Whenever you're doing any form of FM synthesis, it's one of those things that's quite kind of scary and confusing for people. But something that will instantly make sounds work is if I take this and adjust the fine tuning of any of the other operators, you can get this kind of like pulsing, oscillating sound. Rather than having like a really static modulation, it kind of moves and morphs and changes. And so with this one, it's just a whole lot of that. Quite simple waveforms, 2 sine waves, a square wave, although just having the first few harmonics, and then another sine wave, and just bringing those in slowly, but each one is sort of off center as far as the tuning is concerned, with a really long glide time. Oh, not really long, but 100 milliseconds, which is relatively long, and setting it to mono. So all of the notes actually overlap quite a lot with each other, but it helps to create this kind of glide, particularly with that last time here as well. And try and sound do it a lot. Chorus and saturator, which aren't doing too much. Saturator's really pushing the volume, but not much more than that. Amp simulator just gives a little bit more crunch, and then some overdrive, which again just adds like some distortion. So the sound with all of that is really, really horribly distorted, but in a kind of quite a nice way. And then it's just a case of filtering. there's a band pass, and then a notch, and then another band pass. And because you've then taken so much out of the sound, then throwing OTC on it just to bring those tops back again, and kind of squashes it out. I'll bring the volume back up. And then removing the mids, which is something I do with Reese Basses all the time, because like old metal guitars always have like the mids like scooped out of them. Anytime I used to listen to a lot of metal growing up, and so that kind of tone I really like. And then soft clipping again, and then just a filter to bring it in. I mean, this is just the sidechain. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. And then it's just sent off to that reverb, so it's got a bit of space to it. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
What's the most difficult part of, I suppose, either this track or the previous track from the previous video?
For this one, songwriting, just keeping it interesting without having a breakdown. I think my usual method of songwriting would be to do an intro first, whatever, then do your first drop, and then copy your first drop over and just change it a little bit on the second time it happens. Whereas here, it was like, I can't do that. It had to sort of evolve on its own naturally without getting boring, and sort of creating a break, like it's kind of filters down slightly at the start of this drop. So it has like a breakdown without having a breakdown. So composing this without having it sound like boring or repetitive or whatever was definitely the hardest thing, I think.
If you could go back in time and re-release the song, would there be anything that you'd want to change before you release it again?
I don't think so. I'm sort of a fan of like when something's done, it's done, and that's that. And like, I think with music, you can always constantly be editing stuff. Like, if I went back, it would probably sound slightly different if I did this again, but you know, ultimately, like, I like this piece how it is, and it's come out how it is, and yeah, totally. I don't think so.
Would you like our feedback on your song?
Yeah, go on.
Great song. I love the song. Actually, between Believe and this was actually like my more favorite song. It's just a taste thing, just because I like this style of music. I love like the really chill, the really ambient, the little clickety clacky glitchy stuff that you had going on around. I don't know, there's just something about that, something mesmerizing about that to me. And plus you had like the little Reese Bass just come in and make a little entrance here and there, and it was just like so like it was so amazing. There's another song that's similar to this, but not really that similar. It's one that Virtual Riot did. Darkest Night, I think it's called. It's kind of like more kind of chiller, way chiller than what he normally does. Way chiller than what he normally does. Kind of more ambient, kind of more darker, kind of more, you know, kind of chill, I guess you would say. But he teases in his little sound design chops that he has, and it's really, really cool. And so I was really intrigued with this. I actually really, really enjoy this type of music a lot, and I would highly encourage anyone, you know, most of the time the people that we have on the show kind of have more, I don't want to say aggressive music, but kind of more banger-ish music, which is great, like that's fine, but I love this type of music. This type of music is like what makes me crave the night, and like being outside when the moon's full and you can see your shadow at night because the moon's so big. Like, it's just like, I love this kind of music so much, and so I love what you did with that. As far as giving you any feedback to make it better, man, I don't know if I can. Like, it was a really good song, you know. And even as you were breaking it down, I didn't see anything technically wrong with it. This is a great song, dude.
No, I think so. I mean, being compared to Virtual Riot is something I will definitely take.
Yes, I suppose similar to Wyatt, I don't really have anything negative at all to say about the track. So I suppose going in a different direction, so more of a feature to play around with. So I see you using Pro R, which has become my new favorite reverb. At least from my experience, not too many people know that you can actually sync up the pre-delay time to the grid. So you can choose like an 8th or a 16th time for the pre-delay, which is quite really cool for the rhythm. Yes, I think you click that guy.
Oh, wow.
What?
Yeah. So yeah, you can choose like an 8th or a 16th would probably be the normal, probably an 8th would be the more normal pre-delay time. But it means you can kind of end up using reverb in this rhythmic way, which I've been getting some really cool results with. Like, it's almost become my default. Like, if I'm going to choose a pre-delay where it's like a long and noticeable time, like more than 0.6 milliseconds, I pretty much default to like a 16th or an 8th, just because it kind of fits in rhythmically a bit nicer than just a pretty random time.
Oh, that's sick. I genuinely did not know it was a feature. Thank you.
And if the viewers, if you're interested in Pro R, link down in the description. We link out to everything, so make sure to check that out. You did remind me of something, Adam. It was actually a suggestion that I had in the last track. So when you were breaking down Believe, you were showing us all your layers and stuff like that. You got to the one layer, which was, it was a cymatics preset. I think it was fake strings, right? Why not real strings, Elliot? Why not real strings?
So I do the tune I'm doing with Lauren now, I think, has real strings in it. Yeah, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. One of the things on that note that works sometimes really well is having brass. So like getting brass in contact and having that follow it because it's really bright.
Totally a hack to getting like some of the best organic instruments that anyone can ever have. East West, they sponsored the episode. They do not sponsor this episode. This is just a genuine suggestion. They sponsored the episode that we did with Trivecta, the last episode that we did with him. So they have what's called the Composer Cloud X subscription, which basically, like, East West has been around forever, and they have some of the best things that's ever existed. And even just one plugin or one library, right, is like $700 on sale. But you can have their entire thing for $25 a month. You can go in there and like all of it, like 10,000 instruments at your disposal. Like, it's like, what? Like, even if you just use it for 1 month and you just like bounced everything to audio that you wanted, like, that's just freaking insane. You know what I mean? So if you guys want that, link in the description.
Sounds like a steal, man. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Absolutely. And then the final question is, did you have a good time, Elliot?
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, guys. It's been great.
Absolutely, yeah, thanks.
Hey, DAW Nation. Hope you enjoyed this episode of In the DAW that we just did with Elliot Berger, breaking down his song Behind the Glass. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. And when you press subscribe, make sure you tap that little notification bell. Also, if you're interested in getting that Ableton rack for the Reese Bass, sounds like this. There's a link for that down in the description. Go ahead and check that out. Also in the description is links for the Patreon. There's also links for giving suggestions for certain artists to come on the show. There is a link for private lessons in electronic music production or social media marketing. And you also can enter to win a 20-minute free consultation for social media marketing. So go ahead and check that out. Also, check out our companion podcast, which is Behind the DAW. You can find it anywhere, either on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Deezer, literally wherever you listen to podcasts at. It is where we interview music producers, artists, music industry experts, people of that nature on an emotional, philosophical, artistic, and music business basis. We've recently interviewed people like Henry Fong, Kara. I also gave them social media marketing consultations. I gave those away for free. If you really want to listen to In the DAW instead of watching it, we also bounce those out so you can just listen to it there as well. So go ahead and check that out over there. And with all that out of the way, DAW Nation, make sure to come back in 2 weeks. We're either going to be releasing the episode that we did with Tynan or the episode that we did with Culprit, or maybe even another person, huh? You just have to come back and check it out. But DAW Nation, thank you so much for checking out this episode of In the DAW, and we'll see you next time.